The rain had been falling since dawn, steady and cold, like the sky was trying to warn him. In the huge marble dressing room of the Kingston estate, Ethan Kingston, heir to one of the richest families in the city, stood in front of the mirror adjusting the black tux he was supposed to wear on the biggest day of his life. It was his wedding day, a day planned down to the smallest detail. But something about the morning felt strangely heavy. The silence in the room had a weight he couldn't explain. Maybe it was nerves, maybe it was doubt, or maybe, as he would soon learn, it was the truth finally catching up to him. Behind him, almost invisible in the shadows near the wardrobe, stood Rosa, the maid who worked quietly in the Kingston household for nearly 5 years. She wasn't like the others. Rosa never gossiped, never complained, never asked for anything. She moved with the kind of soft, careful steps a person learns after a lifetime of trying not to disturb anyone. Most days, Ethan barely noticed her, not because he was arrogant, but because she made herself impossible to notice. But today, Rosa didn't blend into the background. Her hands trembled slightly as she straightened the collar of his suit. She wasn't supposed to be attending to him, especially not on his wedding day. But the other staff were busy preparing for the grand event, and somehow she had ended up here, standing right behind a man who had unknowingly changed her entire life. Ethan sensed her uneasiness, though he didn't know why. He turned slightly, giving her a polite smile. "You all right, Rosa?" Her eyes widened for a moment, as if she wasn't expecting him to speak. "Yes, sir," she whispered, stepping back. But her voice cracked just enough that Ethan paused. He watched her lower her gaze quickly, almost as if she feared he would search her eyes and find something she'd been hiding. He didn't. Not yet. He simply nodded and returned to mirror. The room went quiet again, except for the soft rustle of fabric and the distant sound of wedding preparations echoing through the mansion. Rosa lingered for a few more seconds, clutching the edge of her apron. She looked at Ethan's suit hanging on the rack, the one she had carefully pressed earlier that morning. Her throat tightened. Inside that suit, hidden in a place she prayed he wouldn't check until it was too late, was a letter. The letter she had written at midnight with shaking hands. The letter she wished she never had to write. The letter she hoped, no, needed, him to read before he said, "I do." It wasn't a love letter. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't even about her. It was something far more dangerous and far more heartbreaking. Ethan checked the time on his watch. Less than 2 hours until the ceremony. His best friend had jokingly reminded him that the Kingston wedding wasn't just a celebration, it was a media spectacle. The kind of event people whispered about for months. A wedding between two powerful families. A contract wrapped in flowers and gold. And yet, despite all the glamour, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He glanced at Rosa again. Her small figure was already walking toward the door, but she paused before leaving. For the first time in years, he saw something in her expression, fear mixed with urgency, as if she wanted to tell him something, but didn't know how. "Rosa?" he asked gently. She froze. Her fingers curled around the doorknob. "Yes, sir?" "Did something happen? You look worried." Her lips parted, but no words came out. She couldn't tell him. She wasn't sure he would believe her. She wasn't sure his world would even allow her to speak. So she simply shook her head and slipped out of the room. Ethan exhaled slowly. The oddness of the moment stayed with him. He reached for his suit jacket, running a hand along the fabric. It felt different today, not physically, but emotionally, as if the air around it held a story he didn't know. He put it on anyway, unaware that the moment he did, Rosa's letter was now resting against his heart. Downstairs, the mansion buzzed with excitement. Decorators rushed around with bouquets. Photographers adjusted their cameras. Guests began to arrive in black cars that lined the driveway. Everyone was ready for the perfect fairy tale wedding. Everyone except Rosa. She stood alone in the narrow staff hallway, her back pressed against the wall as she tried to steady her breathing. She closed her eyes, remembering her mother's voice from years ago, the same voice she heard every time she was afraid. When you know something that can save someone's life, even if it hurts, you must speak. But speaking wasn't allowed in this house. Not for someone like her. Not when the truth involved secrets buried so deeply it could tear everything apart. Her eyes filled with tears, but she wiped them quickly. She had done what she could. Now, she could only pray Ethan would see the letter before it was too late. Meanwhile, upstairs, Ethan adjusted the cuffs of his jacket. As he lifted his arm, he felt something stiff inside the inner seam, a small, folded paper he didn't remember placing there. His brows furrowed. He reached in and pulled it out carefully. A handwritten letter, his name on the front. His heartbeat picked up. He unfolded it slowly, his eyes moving from one line to the next, and with every word, the color in his face drained. The room suddenly felt colder. The world outside seemed to fade. His breathing grew uneven. The letter wasn't long, but it was enough. Enough to shake everything he believed about the woman he was marrying. Enough to tear apart the story his family had shown the world. Enough to break him. Downstairs, wedding music began to play. Ethan didn't move. He just stared at the last line, the one that shattered him the most. And at that exact moment, Rosa stood behind a curtain near the stairs, watching him from afar, knowing that nothing in this house would ever be the same again. What Ethan read was a truth no groom should ever discover on his wedding day. And the real question was, what would he do with it? Ethan's hand trembled as he held the letter. The paper softened the edges as if it had been folded and unfolded many times before Rosa dared to hide it in his suit. His eyes kept drifting back to the last line, the one sentence that refused to leave his mind no matter how many times he blinked. He felt as though someone had pressed a weight against his chest, making it hard to breathe. Outside the door, footsteps rushed past, the sounds of celebration growing louder. Laughter, music, the clinking of glass. Everyone downstairs was preparing for a perfect wedding. But in Ethan's world, everything had stopped moving. He lowered himself onto the edge of the bed, the letter hanging loosely from his fingers. A strange coldness crept into his bones as the memories he had been ignoring for years began to stir again. He remembered the first time he met Isabella, the woman he was supposed to marry today. She had been charming, confident, and graceful in a way that drew everyone's attention. When she walked into a room, conversations paused. People turned. She was the type of person who always knew exactly what to say. His parents adored her. Their families matched in status, wealth, and ambition. Everything about the relationship seemed perfect, almost too perfect. But perfection had a cost. Ethan had always felt a quiet distance between their worlds, but he had convinced himself that all relationships have flaws. He kept telling himself he was overthinking, that the strange moments he noticed, her guarded expressions, her half-finished explanations, her quick change of topics whenever he asked about her past, were nothing serious. Just normal things couples work through. Now, staring at Rose's trembling handwriting, he wasn't so sure anymore. The letter didn't accuse anyone directly. It didn't spill out dramatic claims or wild stories. Rosa had written in gentle, simple words, almost apologetic ones. But the message was clear enough to leave Ethan shaking. His fiancée wasn't who she claimed to be, and Rosa somehow knew the truth. A soft knock at the door startled him. Ethan quickly folded the letter and slipped it back into the inside pocket of his jacket. "Ethan," his mother's voice floated from the hallway, warm and cheerful. "Guests are arriving. Are you ready, darling?" He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The knock came again, more curious this time. Finally, he forced himself to respond. "Yes, Mom, just a minute." He heard her footsteps fade, and the hallway grew silent again. Ethan stood slowly. His reflection in the mirror didn't look like a groom anymore. It looked like a man standing on the edge of something he didn't understand. He straightened his jacket, feeling the letter press against his heart again, almost as though reminding him it was still there. Downstairs, Rosa was walking quickly through the servants' corridor, her heart pounding as she tried to disappear into the background like she always did. She hoped no one would notice the worry on her face. She hoped no one had seen her slip the letter into his suit. She paused near the service elevator, pressing a hand over her mouth to quiet the panic rising inside her. Every sound felt louder, doors opening, heels clicking on tile, voices traveling up the staircase. If anyone discovered what she had done, she could lose her job, or worse, she could be blamed for creating trouble on the most important day for the family. But she had done it anyway. because someone had to tell him the truth. She leaned her head against the cold wall and closed her eyes, remembering the moment it all began. The night she walked into the study to drop off documents and accidentally heard a conversation she was never supposed to hear. She had only caught fragments, whispers spoken between Isabella and a man Rosa didn't recognize. But the words she remembered had been enough to keep her awake for nights. A deal, a threat, a secret arrangement that involved Ethan without his knowledge. Rosa had convinced herself she misunderstood it. She had prayed she was wrong. But the more she watched, the more she saw small things, the coded messages, the hidden phone calls, the sudden changes in Isabella's behavior. So she wrote the letter. She had no proof, only fear and instinct. But something inside her told her Ethan needed to know. A bell chimed through the hallway, signaling that the ceremony would begin soon. Rosa flinched and opened her eyes. She needed to return to her duties. She needed to act normal. She couldn't risk drawing attention. Meanwhile, in the grand hall, Isabella was being photographed beside a wall of white flowers. She looked stunning, every hair in place, every detail perfect. Her smile was soft, but her eyes carried something else hidden behind them, something calculating, something restless. The wedding planner rushed toward her. "The groom will be downstairs shortly," she said. "Everything is right on schedule." Isabella nodded, but her fingers tightened around her bouquet just a little too hard. For a second, she stepped away from the cameras and inhaled deeply as if preparing herself for something bigger than the event happening around her. She glanced up the staircase. Ethan still hadn't appeared, and that made her uneasy. Ethan stepped out of his room at that exact moment, walking slowly down the long hallway, unsure what he was supposed to feel or do. Every step felt heavier. He could hear the music playing softly from below. Guests were laughing. Someone called out his name cheerfully. He reached the top of the staircase and looked down at the sea of people waiting. But all he saw was Rose in the distance, trying to keep herself small as she arranged the last pieces of decor. Their eyes met for a single second, a second that felt longer than anything. She froze, her face paling. Did he read it? Did he believe her? Is he angry? Is he hurt? Ethan didn't give her any answer through his expression. He looked away quickly, trying to steady his breath. As he reached the bottom of the staircase, his best friend Mason clapped a hand on his shoulder. "There you are, man. Thought you were getting cold feet." Ethan forced a smile he didn't feel. "I'm fine." "Good." Mason laughed. "Everyone's excited. Isabella looks incredible." Ethan nodded but didn't speak. His mind was spinning too fast. The wedding officiant called everyone to take their seats. The doors to the garden ceremony opened, revealing rows of white chairs and an aisle covered in soft petals. Everything looked perfect, like a scene from a magazine. But inside him, nothing was perfect anymore. He took his place at the front, his hands tightening into fists as he felt the folded letter once again. Rose's handwriting burned in his memory. The music shifted to the bridal entrance melody. Everyone stood and turned. The doors opened. Isabella appeared, glowing, graceful, confident. Ethan swallowed hard as she walked toward him, every step slow and elegant. But in his mind, the last line of the letter repeated over and over, echoing louder than the music. And just as Isabella reached halfway down the aisle, a sudden gust of wind swept through the garden, rustling flowers and curtains. Ethan's heart thudded painfully, because behind that gust of wind came the faint sound of footsteps. Footsteps he recognized. Footsteps that didn't belong to a bride. He turned his head slowly. Rosa stood at the back of the aisle, shaking, her eyes filled with fear and urgency. She shouldn't have been there. And the moment Ethan saw her expression, he knew whatever truth she had hinted at in the letter was far from over, and this wedding was not going to go as planned. Ethan froze when he saw Rosa standing at the back of the aisle. She wasn't moving, wasn't speaking, just staring at it with eyes that carried a kind of fear he had never seen before. The guests began whispering, confused as to why Maid had entered so suddenly and why the groom's expression had changed from calm to shaken. Isabella noticed it too. She paused mid-step, her smile fading slightly as she followed Ethan's gaze. The moment her eyes found Rosa, a flicker of something sharp and unguarded crossed her face. Gone so fast that most people would have missed it. But Ethan didn't. Not today. Not after the letter. His pulse quickened. His thoughts began to twist into knots. The weight of the hidden truth, the questions the letter raised, the warning Rosa's presence now carried. Everything pressed down on him at once. The officiant cleared his throat, trying to cover the growing tension. Shall we continue? But Isabella didn't move forward. Instead, she looked at Ethan with concern layered over something else. Something he couldn't read clearly. "Ethan," she whispered softly, her voice carrying just enough to reach him. He swallowed hard. Just a moment. Isabella stepped slightly closer, lowering her bouquet. "Is something wrong?" He couldn't answer. Not when the last line of Rosa's letter replayed in his mind. "She isn't marrying you for love. She's marrying you because she has no choice, and I'm afraid you don't know the real reason why." He didn't want to accuse Isabella. He didn't want to doubt her in front of everyone. But he couldn't pretend nothing had shaken him either. Behind the rows of chairs, Rosa stood trembling, unsure whether she'd done the right thing by showing up. She hadn't planned to. She only wanted Ethan to read the letter and decide for himself. But as the ceremony started, a tight, uneasy feeling had pulled her to the garden door, as if something bigger was still about to happen. Something Ethan needed to see. A soft voice broke the silence. It was Mason, stepping just behind Ethan. "Hey, man, do you want to step aside for a second?" Ethan hesitated. The guest shifted uncomfortably, sensing the wedding slipping off its perfect track. Isabella's parents exchanged glances. The planner whispered to her assistants. Everyone was trying to piece together what had gone wrong. Isabella forced a gentle smile. "Ethan, if something's troubling you, we can talk after the ceremony. Right now." "No." He said it quietly but firmly, surprising even himself. Her smile stiffened, and for a moment, her eyes flashed with something guarded. "Then what is it? Why are you looking at me like that?" "Because I don't know you anymore," he wanted to say. "Because someone who has never lied to me is terrified for me today. Because I'm afraid of what I might find if I ask you the questions buried in Rosa's letter." But instead, he said nothing. Behind the aisle, Rosa took a small step forward. One of the security men, noticing her movement, approached her and whispered, "Ma'am, staff are not allowed here during the ceremony." Rosa opened her mouth, then stopped when she noticed Isabella looking directly at her. The look Isabella gave wasn't anger. It wasn't fear either. It was something cold, quiet, and filled with warning. And in that instant, Rosa understood something Ethan didn't. Isabella already knew about the letter. Rosa's breathing turned shallow. She gently nodded at the guard and stepped back, not wanting to create more trouble. But before she could disappear into the side hallway, she heard Isabella call out, "Rosa?" Every head turned. Even Ethan stiffened. Rosa froze in place. Isabella's voice was calm, almost too calm. "Is there a reason you're here? You seem upset." Rosa felt trapped. Dozens of eyes were now staring at her. She wasn't prepared for this. She wasn't meant to be part of the ceremony. Her job was to remain invisible, to serve quietly, to never interfere. She lowered her eyes. I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to interrupt." "Then why are you here?" Isabella pressed gently, her expression controlled. "Is something wrong?" The question held weight. Not just curiosity, pressure. Ethan stepped forward. "Isabella, stop. She's not doing anything wrong." But Isabella didn't look at him. Her attention remained on Rosa, who was shrinking under the intensity of the moment. Rosa's chest tightened. She couldn't reveal everything. Not in front of all these people. Not without proof. Not without risking her job, or worse. So she gave the safest answer she could. "I just came to make sure everything was in order, sir. Ma'am, I'm sorry." She turned to leave, but Ethan's voice stopped her. "Rosa." Her shoulders stiffened. She slowly turned back. He took a step toward her, lowering his voice so only she and a few nearby guests could hear. "Did you want to say something?" Rosa's eyes glistened. She bit her lip. She shook her head again. But Ethan could see the truth in her silence. She was scared. Not of him, but of someone else. Isabella stepped closer to Ethan, gently placing her hand on his arm. "Ethan," she whispered, "this is our wedding. Please, don't let small misunderstandings ruin it." Her touch had always been comforting, but now it felt forced, almost like she wanted to pull him away from the truth before it reached him. Before he could respond, his father approached with a diplomatic smile. "Everything all right here? The guests are waiting." Ethan's mind spun. He felt pulled from every angle. The expectations of his family, the calm insistence of Isabella, the silent warning in Rosa's eyes, and the letter burning in his pocket like a hidden flame ready to spread. He forced in a breath. "I just need a moment." He walked away from the altar, leaving the guests murmuring behind him. Mason quickly followed. Isabella stayed where she was, her jaw tight but controlled. At the far end of the garden, Ethan stopped near a fountain, gripping the edge until his knuckles turned white. Mason stood beside him. "Ethan, what's going on? This isn't like you." Ethan pulled the letter from his pocket and handed it to him. "Read it." Mason skimmed it, his brow nodding with confusion. "Who wrote this?" "Rosa." "Yes." "And you believe it?" "I don't know," Ethan whispered. "But look at her. She's terrified. She wouldn't risk everything unless she was desperate." Mason didn't reply. He stared at the final line, the one that questioned the entire foundation of Ethan's wedding. Behind them, Rosa stood half hidden behind a hedge, watching Ethan with a heart full of worry and guilt. She knew things were spiraling faster than she expected. She knew the truth she hinted at was far bigger than a simple warning. Because Rosa wasn't just protecting Ethan. She was also protecting someone else. Someone Ethan didn't know existed, and someone Isabella was desperate to keep hidden. As the wind rustled to the garden again and the guests waited anxiously for the ceremony to resume, Ethan felt the world shifting under his feet, slowly pulling him toward a truth that none of them were ready to face. And the wedding, once a symbol of unity, was now standing on the edge of a secret strong enough to destroy everything. Ethan stood at the fountain, the letter trembling between his fingers, but it wasn't the wind making his hands shake. It was a feeling that everything he believed about this day, about Isabella, about their future, had shifted into something he no longer recognized. Mason tried to say something, but the tension wrapped around both of them like a tight rope, making every word feel heavy. Behind them, faint murmurs from the garden grew sharper. Guests were confused, restless. The wedding planner whispered into her headset. Isabella's parents were speaking quietly with each other, glancing toward Ethan with growing worry or impatience. And Isabella herself stood alone at the center of the aisle, still holding her bouquet, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. Rosa hovered at the edge of the garden, barely visible behind the tall plants. Her eyes followed Ethan with guilt and fear, knowing she had pushed him into the middle of a truth he wasn't ready for yet. But she also knew she couldn't stay silent anymore. Mason sighed deeply. "Ethan, if this letter is true, why didn't she give you proof? There's no names, no details. It's just a warning." "She was afraid," Ethan said softly. "You saw her face. She's still afraid." "Afraid of what?" Mason asked. Before Ethan could answer, the sound of heels clicking against the stone path made them both turn. Isabella was walking toward them, her veil fluttering behind her like a soft white wave. She kept her expression calm, but there was a tightness around her eyes Ethan hadn't noticed before. "Ethan," she said gently, "we need to talk. Privately." Her voice was warm, but not steady. He heard something strain underneath, as if she was trying very hard to keep control. Mason glanced between them, sensing the tension. "I'll give you 2 minutes," he murmured, stepping away. Isabella waited until Mason was far enough, then took Ethan's hand. "What's going on? You're scaring everyone." Ethan didn't speak at first. He looked at her face, the woman he thought he knew, the woman he loved, the woman whose life fit so neatly into the world his parents wanted for him. But now, there was something in her eyes he couldn't ignore anymore. A shadow, a secret. His voice came out low. "Isabella, do you know why Rosa came to the ceremony?" A flicker crossed her features, small but undeniable. "Ethan, she's just a maid." Maybe she made a mistake. Maybe she panicked. She looked like she wanted to warn me, he said, watching her carefully, like she wanted to stop this. Isabella's lips parted, as if she wanted to answer quickly, but then she stopped herself. She looked down at the ground, breathing slowly, as though choosing her words one by one. "It's our wedding day," she whispered. "Why are you letting someone like her come between us?" "Someone like her?" he repeated quietly. She flinched. "I didn't mean it like that. I don't understand why you're doubting me." Ethan pulled the letter from his pocket and handed it to her. "Because of this," her eyes landed on the folded paper, and for the first time since he'd met her, Isabella didn't hide her reaction. Her face tightened, her shoulders stiffened, and a strange silence hovered between them. She didn't even ask what the letter said. She didn't deny anything. She just stared at it, too long. Ethan's heart pounded. "You've seen this before, haven't you?" She didn't answer. At the far end of the garden, Rosa was watching the two of them, wringing her hands. She knew this moment was coming. She had prayed Ethan wouldn't confront Isabella so soon, but now it was too late. Another complication appeared when Ethan's father approached Rosa, his expression stern. "Why are you still here? You should be inside with the staff." Rosa swallowed nervously. "Sir, I just wanted to—" "You're disrupting the ceremony," he said coldly. "If something is wrong, you come to us, not the groom." Rosa lowered her eyes, feeling the familiar fear of being powerless. But before she could respond, a woman from the catering staff hurried toward her. "Rosa," she whispered urgently, "someone is here to see you. He said it's important." Rosa's face went pale. Her hand shook slightly. She followed the woman toward the side gate near the service area, her thoughts racing uncontrollably. She already knew who it was, and he wasn't supposed to be anywhere near this place. Back near the fountain, Isabella finally lifted her eyes from the letter. Her expression was calm again, but not naturally calm. It was the kind of calm a person forces when the ground beneath them is starting to break. "Ethan, I can explain," she whispered. "Then explain," he said. "Please." Isabella reached for his hand, but he stepped back slightly. She hesitated, hurt flashing in her eyes, but she quickly pushed it down. "You have to trust me," she said. "There are things I should have told you earlier, but I was afraid it would change everything between us." "It already has," he replied quietly. She swallowed hard. "Not here. Not like this. Can we talk somewhere private? Please." Her voice cracked just enough to make him hesitate. He saw the conflict in her eyes, a mix of fear, guilt, and something else he couldn't identify. Something heavier. He nodded slowly. 5 minutes. Outside the guest house. Isabella exhaled, relief softening her shoulders. "I'll meet you there." She turned and walked away, her steps quickening as she disappeared behind the garden arch. But the moment she was out of Ethan's sight, her entire expression changed. Her calm mask dropped, revealing a look of deep worry, almost panic. She pulled out her phone and dialed someone with trembling fingers. "It's happening," she whispered urgently. He read it. "We don't have much time." She listened, nodding rapidly. No, don't come here. If he sees you, yes, I know. Just be ready." She ended the call and took a shaky breath. Meanwhile, Rosa reached the side gate. A man stood there, his hood pulled low, his jaw tight with tension. When he saw Rosa, he stepped forward. "You didn't stop the wedding," he said in a rough whisper. "You promised you would stop it." "I tried," Rosa said, tears filling her eyes. "But she saw me. She knows I did something." "You should have told him everything," the man growled quietly. "Do you understand what happens if she succeeds? Do you know what he's walking into?" Rosa shook her head, crying now. "I'm scared. I don't know what to do anymore." The man grabbed her shoulders gently. "Then you have to tell him the truth. All of it, before she does." Rosa trembled. "And if I do, they'll fire me. They might even—" "They won't get the chance," he said firmly, "because he deserves to know who she really is and why she chose him." His grip loosened. "He deserves to know the truth about his real connection to you." Rosa froze. Her voice broke. "I'm not ready for him to know." "You don't have a choice anymore. the man said softly. Back in the garden, Ethan waited near the guest house, his heart beating faster with each second. The tension around him grew tighter, heavier, as though the entire estate was holding its breath. He had no idea that two people, one he was about to meet and one he trusted all his life, were walking toward him with truths he wasn't prepared to hear. No idea that Isabella wasn't the only one keeping secrets. And no idea that the man Rosa was talking to was connected to him in a way that could rewrite everything he believed about his past. The truth was coming, and the moment arrived. Nothing about this wedding or his life would ever return to normal. The wind outside rattled the windows again, but this time it felt different. Sharper, almost as if the storm itself was reacting to something happening inside the mansion. Liam's breathing had grown softer, yet the tension in the room only thickened. Mr. Archer kept his hand on his son's shoulder, but his eyes kept drifting to Maria, searching her face for answers she still wasn't giving. The servants watched from a distance, uncertain if they should step closer or stay far away. It felt like the walls themselves were waiting for the next moment to unfold. Maria finally stepped back, just one small step, but it changed everything. Her voice trembled as she spoke, not out of fear, but out of something heavier, guilt. She admitted there was something she hadn't shared yet, something even the pendant couldn't explain alone. Mr. Archer's jaw tightened, sensing another truth about to surface. Liam shifted slightly again, but this time a faint glow pulsed under his skin like a heartbeat. Everyone in the room froze. It wasn't bright enough to frighten anyone, but it was strange enough to make them lean in without realizing. Then Maria whispered a name, one Mr. Archer hadn't heard in years. A name tied to someone he thought was gone forever. The moment the name left her lips, Mr. Archer's expression changed completely. His face drained of color, and for the first time that night, true fear flickered across it. He stepped away from Liam, almost stumbling as memories he'd buried long ago forced their way back into the present. The servants exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. Maria explained that the storm was not a coincidence at all. It had been building from the moment she arrived, and it wasn't the weather they needed to worry about. She said someone else was coming, someone who knew the pendant, knew the family, and knew exactly what was happening to Liam. Mr. Archer stared at her, his voice breaking as he demanded to know how she was connected to that person. Maria didn't answer. Instead, she opened her coat slightly, revealing something she had hidden all along, a second pendant, identical to Liam's but cracked down the center. Before Mr. Archer could say another word, the lights flickered overhead. The glow beneath Liam's skin grew brighter, pulsing in slow waves like it was responding to something outside. The air turned colder, sharp enough to send a chill through every person standing in the room. Maria stepped closer to Liam again, her voice barely above a whisper. She wasn't warning them now. She was preparing them, because whoever was coming wasn't coming to help. The storm surged with a sudden roar, shaking the glass in the windows. Somewhere deep inside the mansion, a heavy door slammed on its own. Mr. Archer rushed to Liam, but Maria blocked him with a firm, urgent grip. Her eyes were fixed on the hallway behind him, as though she was listening to footsteps no one else could hear. And then, just as the thunder cracked overhead, the hallway lights began to dim one by one. Someone or something had entered the mansion, and whatever happened next would change everything they thought they understood. The lights in the hallway faded, until only the faint glow from Liam's skin lit the room. Everyone stood frozen, listening to the slow, steady sound of footsteps approaching. Mr. Archer's breath caught in his throat as a tall figure finally appeared at the edge of the dim hallway, moving with a calmness that made the moment even more terrifying. Maria stepped in front of Liam without hesitation, holding the cracked pendant protectively against her chest. The stranger stopped just inside the doorway, his face hidden in the shadows, but his voice was unmistakable, low, steady, and painfully familiar to Mr. Archer. Mr. Archer whispered the name Maria had spoken earlier, barely able to force it out. The stranger lifted his head, and the light from Liam's glow revealed features Mr. Archer hadn't seen in years. It was the man he had once trusted more than anyone, someone he believed was long gone. The shock hit him so hard he had to steady himself against the wall. The servants gasped softly, realizing this was an intruder. It was someone from the family's past, someone tied to the secrets they never talked about. The stranger slowly stepped closer, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. But the moment he did, Liam's glow intensified, as if reacting to him alone. Maria shouted for him to stop, but the man kept moving, calm and certain. He explained that the pendant was never meant to be separated, that Liam's awakening was a result of a broken promise long ago. Maria looked away, guilt tightening her face as the man spoke. Mr. Archer listened with growing disbelief, realizing the storm, the glow, and Maria's return were all connected to a choice he made years back, a choice that had come full circle tonight. Suddenly, Liam let out a breath, soft but steady. His eyes fluttered open, not with fear but with a strange clarity, as if he finally understood what was happening inside him. The glow rose again, surrounding him in a warm, pulsing light. The stranger reached out his hand, encouraging him to stay calm, but the room shook as if the storm had moved inside the walls. Liam pushed himself up slightly, and for the first time he spoke. His voice was gentle, but it echoed with something older, something deeper. He told Mr. Archer that the glow wasn't harming him. It was protecting him. Maria and the stranger exchanged a heavy look. They knew what was coming next. Liam's glow expanded, filling the room until everyone had to shield their eyes. The storm outside suddenly calmed, as if responding to Liam alone. The windows stopped rattling. The thunder faded, and a strange stillness settled over the mansion. Liam placed a small hand over the pendant on Maria's chest, and a cracked piece slowly fused back together, sealing itself with a soft flash. The stranger stepped back, astonished. Mr. Archer's knees buckled, relief washing over him as Liam's glow finally softened to nothing more than a faint shimmer. Everyone took a shaky breath, believing the worst was finally over. But then Liam turned to the stranger with a look no child should ever have, a look filled with recognition. He whispered something barely audible, something that made the man freeze in place. "You're not the one who was supposed to come." The room fell silent again. Maria's face drained of color. Mr. Archer stared at Liam, confusion tightening in his chest. Before anyone could ask what he meant, a sudden gust of wind swept through the mansion, not from the windows, but from the staircase behind them. The air shifted sharply, colder than anything they had felt all night. Footsteps echoed from above, slow, heavy, and this time Maria's voice shook for real. "Then, who did you call?" The footsteps in the staircase grew louder, slow and steady, each one echoing to the quiet mansion as if the walls themselves were listening. Everyone held their breath. Mr. Archer instinctively stepped closer to Liam, though he wasn't sure if he could protect him from whatever was coming. Maria shifted her weight, ready to shield Liam again if she had to. Even the stranger who had appeared moments earlier, so calm before, stood rigid and uncertain. The glow around Liam had faded, but something in his eyes said he still sensed more than the rest of them. He looked toward the staircase long before the figure emerged. When the person finally stepped into view, the tension in the room snapped, not into fear, but into confusion. It wasn't a stranger. It was an elderly woman, leaning heavily on the railing, her hair silver and her eyes filled with something between sorrow and resolve. Mr. Archer blinked, unable to understand what he was seeing. She looked familiar, but he couldn't place her at first. The woman reached the bottom step and paused, her gaze landing on Liam with a softness that made his glow flicker faintly again. Maria's lips parted in disbelief. You weren't supposed to come," she whispered. The elderly woman nodded. "I know." Her voice was calm, steady, but fragile in a way that hinted at years of silence and secrets carried alone. But I had no choice. The moment his glow awakened, I felt it, and I knew the time had come. Mr. Archer finally found his words. "Who are you?" The woman gave him a long, tired look. "Someone you once knew. Someone you should never have forgotten." She took a slow breath. "My name is Evelyn." Mr. Archer froze. He hadn't heard that name in years, not since he was a young man. Evelyn had been his mother's closest companion, the quiet caretaker who had lived with them when he was a child. She had disappeared without a word long before his mother passed away. He'd spent years believing she'd simply moved on, but she hadn't. She stepped forward, ignoring the stranger who watched her with guarded eyes. She looked at Liam with a mixture of fear and understanding. "This child carries something rare," she said softly. "Something our family once protected, long before you or I were born." The stranger's jaw tightened. He wasn't meant to know any of this. "No," Evelyn agreed, but the truth came for him anyway. Mr. Archer struggled to keep up. "What truth? What does my son have to do with any of this?" She turned to him, gentle but unwavering. "Your mother knew the glow wasn't a myth. Our ancestors carried it. Only a few ever awakened it. But your mother feared the world wouldn't understand. Fear it would place danger on the child who inherited it." Her eyes drifted back to Liam. "That child is your son." Liam lowered his head, even without fully understanding the weight of the words. He seemed to grasp that his life had changed forever. Maria stepped closer. "Mr. Archer, the pendant was made to protect the one who carries the glow. Your mother gave it to Evelyn. Evelyn later passed it to me when she knew she wouldn't be able to stay." Her voice wavered with something like guilt. "I never meant to lie. I only wanted to keep Liam safe." Mr. Archer felt the ground shift under him. He looked between Maria and Evelyn, trying to understand how many years of decisions had led to this moment. The storm outside had weakened into a gentle drizzle, as though mirroring the slow return of calm inside the mansion. The stranger spoke next, his tone steady now. "The glow isn't dangerous. But if Liam had awakened without the pendant being restored, it could have overwhelmed him. What you saw tonight was him fighting it alone." He paused. "Now, he doesn't have to." Liam's small hand reached out to Evelyn. She took it gently, her fingers trembling. His faint shimmer lit her face, and something almost like peace settled over her features. "I felt at the moment he woke," she murmured. "Your mother would have been proud." Mr. Archer swallowed hard. For the first time since the chaos began, he felt tears in his eyes. "Why didn't my mother tell me any of this?" Evelyn's expression softened. "She wanted you to live a normal life. She carried the glow once too, but only for a short time. She feared you might inherit it, and she didn't want you to grow up with fear or responsibility you didn't choose." Her gaze shifted to Liam. "But the glow skipped you and chose him." Silence settled over the group, not heavy with fear anymore, but with acceptance, slow, overwhelming acceptance. Liam looked up at his father, his voice small but steady. "Dad, I don't want to be scared anymore." Mr. Archer kneeled in front of him, resting both hands on his shoulders. "You don't have to be," he whispered. "Not now. Not ever." He looked over at Maria, Evelyn, and even the stranger. "You're not alone, Liam. You have all of us." Maria blinked back her own tears. The stranger nodded in quiet agreement. Evelyn placed a gentle hand on Liam's back. For the first time all night, Liam smiled, soft, unsure, but real. Over the next quiet minutes, the mansion began to feel normal again. The servants drifted away, relieved. The storm cleared completely, leaving only the fresh scent of rain in the air. Maria and the stranger spoke quietly with Evelyn, explaining what they had done over the years to keep the pendant safe. Mr. Archer held Liam close, feeling more protective than ever, but also strangely hopeful. Before she left, Evelyn placed her hand on Archer's arm. "This wasn't your fault," she said gently. "Your mother trusted you more than you knew, and she would have trusted you now." She smiled at Liam. He will grow, learn, and understand how to use his gift. But he will never be a burden. He will be a light. Mr. Archer nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle in his heart. When the house finally quieted and the guests left, only Maria remained. She tucked the restored pendant into Liam's hand, letting him hold it. He didn't glow this time, not with power, but with a sense of belonging. Maria looked at Mr. Archer with a tired but relieved smile. "He'll be okay now." Archer nodded. "We all will." They watched Liam drift into a peaceful sleep for the first time in hours. The room felt warm, calm, almost new. The storm had come and gone, but what remained wasn't fear. It was clarity. And as Archer stood there, watching his son breathe softly, he realized something simple and powerful. Sometimes the secrets kept to protect us eventually bring us the truth we needed all along. The glow had awakened. The past had spoken. But the future, finally, felt safe.